Storm clouds surround the aircraft, turbulence terrifying everyone. The young pilot's trembling voice comes through the cabin speakers. "Mayday! Mayday! We're losing control!" At that moment, 68-year-old Frank slowly rises from seat 42C. "Son," he says in a calm voice, "I need to get to the cockpit." The young flight attendant tries to stop him. "Sir, please remain in your seat." What they didn't know was that within minutes, this elderly man would save 197 lives, and his past would shock everyone. But before we dive into this incredible story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever experienced or witnessed something like this, share it in the comments below. If you want to be the first to hear about more inspiring stories like this one, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Frank Cooper wakes up at 5:30 every morning, just as he has for the past 40 years. Even though he no longer needs to get to the cockpit, his body clock refuses to change. From his small apartment in Denver, he can see the distant lights of the airport through his window. A place he once went to every day, now just a distant memory he gazes at with longing. His morning routine never changes. Black coffee, 2 sugars. He checks the weather conditions, an old habit. He reads meteorological reports, notes wind directions, analyzes cloud formations. At 68, he still sees the world through a pilot's eyes. While showering, he looks at himself in the mirror. Gray hair, deep lines, but his eyes are still sharp. These hands once controlled aircraft in the most challenging weather conditions. This brain once solved the most complex navigation problems. Now, his biggest challenge is deciding what to buy at the grocery store. Frank worked as a commercial airline pilot for 35 years. He started with small intercity flights, then moved to major international routes. During his career, he flew 2.7 million miles, carried 850,000 passengers, never had an accident. His colleagues called him Safe Frank, because flying with him always meant coming home. But when the age limit came, all his experience suddenly became irrelevant. Federal Aviation Administration rules are clear. Mandatory retirement at 65. For safety, they said. What safety? Frank's reflexes were still sharper than most young pilots, his knowledge deeper, his experience broader. But rules were rules. The first years of retirement were hard. His wife Helen was still working. Their children had built their own lives. Frank felt empty. Going from being a man who held lives in his hands every day for 35 years to suddenly having no responsibilities wasn't easy. When Helen died of a heart attack 2 years ago, Frank's world completely collapsed. Now he had neither work nor someone by his side. His retirement pension was enough for comfortable living, but Frank didn't want to live comfortably. He wanted to feel alive. So he occasionally tried to meet with old colleagues, went to aviation fairs, tried to chat with young pilots, but most of the time he felt excluded. While they talked about the future, he remained in the past. That Tuesday morning, Frank needed to fly to Los Angeles. He was going to attend his grandson Kevin's university graduation ceremony. Normally, he would drive, but Dr. Martinez advised him to avoid long trips due to arthritis in his leg. "Fly, Frank. Remember the old days." At Denver Airport during check-in, he noticed that the young staff treated him politely but distantly. To them, he was just another elderly passenger. Going through security, the officer was surprised when he saw his pilot ID. "Are you a pilot, sir?" "Retired pilot," Frank corrected. "Ah, I see." The young man's interest immediately diminished. In this industry, retired meant dead. When he sat in seat 42C, he watched the runways through his window. With each aircraft takeoff, his heart clenched a little, wanting to be there, but knowing he was condemned to remain a spectator. The aircraft was AA Flight 447, direct flight to Los Angeles. Boeing 737-800, 197 passengers. Captain Jake Morrison, 32 years old, 5 years of experience. Co-pilot Sarah Chen, 28 years old, 3 years of experience. Frank deduced this information from the flight attendant's announcement, old habit. Takeoff was smooth. Frank spent the first half hour of the flight mentally analyzing the pilot's techniques. They were good pilots, but still very young. Experience takes years. Passing over Colorado, Frank looked at the clouds. There was heavy cloud formation to the east, signs of severe wind to the west. He vaguely remembered the meteorological report. There was a turbulence warning for today. The first shaking started over Nevada, light turbulence, uncomfortable for passengers but normal for pilots. Frank checked his seatbelt with old reflexes. But the next shake was much more severe. The aircraft made a sudden drop. Passengers screamed. Frank immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. This wasn't normal turbulence. Microbursts, sudden wind changes, dangerous meteorological events. Captain Morrison's voice came through the cabin speakers, but there was worry in his tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain in your seats." Frank caught the tension in the pilot's voice. With 35 years of experience, he could tell when a pilot was truly worried. This wasn't just some turbulence. The next 4 minutes were among the most severe weather conditions Frank had ever experienced in his life, and he wasn't even in the cockpit. The aircraft swayed left and right, suddenly climbing and descending. Luggage fell. Passengers cried. Children screamed. Then the aircraft's sound changed. Frank immediately heard the difference in engine sound. Left engine problem. In a twin-engined aircraft, engine loss is critical, especially in these weather conditions. The speaker crackled again, this time more tense. "Dear passengers, we're experiencing a technical problem. Please remain calm and follow the crew's instructions." Frank stood up. He couldn't sit anymore. "Sir, please remain in your seat." Young flight attendant Sarah tried to stop him. "Miss, I need to get to the cockpit," Frank said in a calm but determined voice. "Sir, passengers are not allowed in the cockpit. Please." At that moment, the aircraft shook so violently that Sarah lost her balance. Emergency lights began flashing. And then came the voice you never want to hear through the speakers. "Mayday! Mayday! Mayday! This is AA Flight 447. We've lost left engine, severe turbulence, experiencing control difficulty, requesting emergency landing." The cabin was in panic, but for Frank, this was time for action. "Sarah," Frank turned to the flight attendant, "I'm a retired airline pilot. I have 35 years of experience. Right now, there are very young pilots in the cockpit, and they might not be able to handle this situation. I need to help them." Sarah hesitated. Rules versus real emergency. Frank passed her and walked to the cockpit door. He knocked. "Who is it?" A tense voice from inside. "Retired Captain Frank Cooper. You might need help." The door opened. Captain Morrison's face was covered in sweat, panic in his eyes. "I don't care who you are right now." "Son," Frank interrupted calmly, "you've lost your left engine, you're in severe turbulence, and you're about to lose control. Trust me, I've experienced this situation for 35 years." Morrison hesitated for a moment. The authority, calmness, confidence in Frank's tone, this was a pilot's voice. "Come in," Morrison made his decision. When Frank entered the cockpit, he saw the severity of the situation. Red lights flashing on the control panel, alarms sounding, radio traffic chaotic. Co-pilot Sarah Chen was frozen in panic, unable to do anything, while Morrison was trying to control the situation but was clearly beyond his capacity. "What's the situation?" Frank asked, as naturally as if he was born for this. "Left engine went out 3 minutes ago," Morrison explained quickly.
Severe turbulence, wind shear present. We're losing altitude and control is getting difficult. Trying to return to Denver."
Frank quickly scanned the instruments. 35 years of experience kicked in. Speed, altitude, fuel status, weather conditions, wind direction. He analyzed all data within seconds. "Denver is too far," Frank said calmly. "You won't make it there with one engine in these weather conditions. Nearest airport is Grand Junction, 47 miles southeast. But Grand Junction is too small for our aircraft." "Son, you have no alternative," Frank interrupted Morrison. "We can land at Grand Junction. I know the runway, I know the wind conditions there, but we need to act now." Morrison hesitated. He didn't know this man, but he couldn't deny the experience and authority in his voice. "Give me control," Frank suggested. "What? No, I'm the captain." "Jake, it's not about ego, it's about lives. You're a good pilot, but you haven't encountered this situation before. I have, many times." At that moment, the aircraft shook violently again. Sarah Chen was crying silently. Morrison made his decision. "Give me control." The moment Frank sat in the cockpit, 35 years of experience returned. His hands naturally went to the controls, his eyes scanned the instruments, his brain automatically analyzed the situation. The first thing he did was communicate. "Grand Junction, this is AA Flight 447, emergency situation, single engine, 197 passengers, requesting landing clearance. AA 447, Grand Junction Control, our runway is marginal for your size aircraft, confirm situation. Grand Junction, we have single engine, no alternative, we can land." Frank turned to Morrison. "Make an announcement to passengers. Tell them we're making an emergency landing. Everyone needs to assume crash position. Don't create panic, but let them know it's serious." While Morrison made his announcement, Frank began directing the aircraft toward Grand Junction. With single engine and in these weather conditions, every move was calculated. "Sarah," Frank turned to the co-pilot. "Pull yourself together. Give me fuel status. Check cabin pressure. Prepare emergency systems." Frank's calm but authoritative manner calmed the panic in the cockpit. He was doing what he had done thousands of times for 35 years, safely bringing the aircraft to the ground. But this wouldn't be easy. As they approached Grand Junction, the wind became even stronger. Crosswind, sidewind, one of the most challenging. Landing with single engine in crosswind was difficult even for the most experienced pilots. "Grand Junction, we're on final approach. Have ambulance and fire rescue ready." "Copy. AA 447. Wind 230 degrees at 35 knots, gusts 45. Good luck." Frank had never tried landing a 737 with single engine in this wind condition, but he had theoretical knowledge and experience. "Jake, is everyone ready?" "Yes, sir. Everyone in the cabin is in crash position." "Good. Now don't make a sound. Let me concentrate." Final approach began. Frank aligned the aircraft with the runway, but wind was constantly pushing it right. Without the left engine, there was no power balance. Every second he struggled to keep the aircraft under control. Altitude 500 feet, 400, 300. As they got closer to the ground, the wind became even stronger. The aircraft was drifting right. 200 feet, 100. At the last second, Frank's 35 years of experience kicked in. With perfect timing, accounting for the wind, he touched the aircraft down on the runway. But it wasn't over. Braking with single engine was very difficult. They were rapidly approaching the end of the runway. Frank engaged all braking systems, reverse thrust, wheel brakes, spoilers. The aircraft slowed, and stopped. 197 people, safe and sound. Silence in the cockpit. Then Morrison's voice. "God, how did you do that?"
Frank unbuckled his seatbelt. Experience, son. Just experience.
Emergency crews boarded the aircraft. Passengers were evacuated. Everyone was safe. Frank was one of the last to leave the aircraft. When he stepped onto the tarmac, Morrison was waiting for him. "Sir, my name is Jake Morrison. I apologize." "For what, Jake?" For underestimating you, for not wanting to give you control at first." Frank smiled. "Jake, ego is normal, but in this job, ego doesn't save lives, experience does." Sarah Chen also approached. "Captain Cooper, we don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me, learn," Frank said. "This job doesn't end with age. Experience accumulates, knowledge deepens. Don't just retire old pilots, learn from them." Airport manager, Federal Aviation Administration representatives, press, everyone wanted to talk to Frank. But Frank just wanted to make it to his grandson Kevin's graduation ceremony. That evening, in his hotel room, phones were ringing. News channels, newspapers, airline companies, everyone was talking about the heroism of the 68-year-old retired pilot. But the most important call was different. "Mr. Cooper, this is Tom Bradley from United Airlines. Could we speak with you?" The following week, Frank was at United Airlines headquarters in Denver. Across from him sat the company's senior executives. "Mr. Cooper, we'd like to make you an offer. Would you work as a simulator instructor? Would you train our young pilots in emergency procedures?" Frank thought for a moment. "Age limit? Not for you. Salary? Full-time, comprehensive benefits." Frank smiled. "I accept." 6 months later, Frank was one of United Airlines' most respected instructors. Young pilots called him Legend Frank because every story he told was real. Every lesson came from life experience. Jake Morrison and Sarah Chen became Frank's first students. From this experienced pilot they called mentor, they learned knowledge they couldn't find in any textbook. Frank's training methods reduced United's accident rate by 40%. Other airline companies started similar programs. American Airlines gave Frank a Lifetime Achievement Award. His speech at the award ceremony became legendary in the aviation industry. Flying isn't just about technical knowledge. This job requires experience, intuition, and the ability to remain calm. These come with age. They don't disappear with age. Teach young pilots technology, but also teach them experience. Because what saves lives isn't technology, it's experience. Today, Frank is 70 years old and still actively working. On the wall of his office at United Airlines hangs a photo of AA Flight 447. Below it, a small plaque, "Experience never retires." Every year, on March 21st, on the anniversary of that day, passengers of AA Flight 447 send thank you letters to Frank. 197 people tell him they owe their lives to him. When Frank reads these letters, he understands that retirement is actually not about being finished, but about new beginnings. Michael Thompson was one of the passengers on the plane that day. In his letter to Frank, he said, "Captain Cooper, that day you didn't just give us life, you gave us hope. You showed that age isn't a limitation, it's an advantage." Frank's reply was simple. "Michael, I didn't do anything special that day. I just applied what I had learned in 35 years. Experience never disappears. It just waits for the right moment." Sometimes the greatest heroism isn't achieved by safely landing the aircraft, but by breaking people's prejudices. Sometimes the most important lesson is learned not in the cockpit, but in life. Our value doesn't diminish with age, it just takes time to be recognized. And sometimes the most powerful message is this:
Experience is our most valuable asset that no technology can replace. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and hit the notification bell to be the first to know about more inspiring content. And remember that wisdom comes in many forms, and the person you overlook today might be the hero you need tomorrow.